with Jimmy Vivino. Jimmy, I haven't seen you in 6 years,
You haven't
pre-COVID.
seen me since we did the other podcast, the other broad. I don't know if it was a podcast or just a
I
broadcast.
don't like the word podcast.
No,
This is a
oh, it
show.
was.
This is a talk show.
Well, it certainly is.
It is. It's a talk show.
It's long form, though.
It's
We don't.
it's way long form. We talked almost 2 hours last time, just a few minutes shy of 2 hours.
What amazed me is though that kids, especially when I say kids, anyone under 50, uh, they 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 were so amazed with this podcast thing, which is really just radio. Something we grew up with, local.
Absolutely.
Like Vince Scelsa on the
Oh
radio.
my God. And you and I grew up with the same thing of everything because we are just a few months apart.
Yeah, yeah,
We
yeah.
were both at Watkins Glen. We were both at the same Filmore East shows.
You just look better than I do. But we both were. We were on the tail end of the Love generation.
We were, but you and I jumped in really young, and we got to experience a lot of it.
Yeah, we got in trouble with our parents. So
we did.
In the name of rock and roll.
Although, you know what? I didn't get in a lot of. My mother wasn't paying attention. I got away with a lot of stuff.
Well, we just lied. Like we would go to the Fillmore. Me and my brother Jerry would go. We'd take a bus from Jersey to Port Washington, take a subway down to the Cube at Astor Place, and walk over to Second Avenue.
Yeah,
where the Fillmore was. And then we'd call our father and say we went to the Yankee game and and it went into extra innings. Come and pick us up because there was no buses running anymore once we got up to Fort Washington Avenue. And and I think he knew what we would.
I was going to say, was he on to you?
Well, he would say things, son. I was a rebel in my time too. I smoked boo and weed, but he didn't call it weed. He called it reefer. I smoked reefer in the army. And so.
Well, because there was no way to come home from the Fillmore and not be reeking of reefer. There was just no way.
Whatever else postage stamp they sent down the aisle. Whatever.
Oh God, yeah.
God. 13 and 14. But. At the same time, my father would sneak me into jazz clubs, and my uncle. I played with Mitch Ryder the other week. I saw Mitch Ryder for the first time in years, and I told him how my uncle used to sneak me into the Cheetah to see him.
Oh my God! I just interviewed Yorma and Jack Cassidy in the last month, and I saw both of them. I saw Hot Tuna at the Fillmore 50 years. That's just crazy right there.
All my friends they're like 10. 11 years, 12 years older, and they're 80, 82, and I feel like we're still 14 and they're 24, I told Fido when I came onto the Candide project that I've been in this band since I was 13. I got them on the road again, and I played it over, and in my mind I was in your band in 1968. So
this is something we didn't talk about last time. How did you get into Candide, and when did this happen?
When we spoke, I wasn't there yet. But during COVID, Rick Reed, who was taken over for Larry Taylor, who had passed, because he filled in for Larry a lot and played bass a lot while Larry would play guitar when he wasn't doing that well. And Larry used to call me to sub on the gig, but I could never do it before. So I always wanted to do it. And finally we went over to Fido's house, and Fido's been there 56, 57 years. Yeah, 57 years.
Oh my God.
And he looked at me, and that's when my beard was, huge. And I was probably about 35 pounds heavier. And he says, you look like Candide. You look like everyone that's ever been in the band all at once. But really, it's a blues band that had 3 hit singles, and therefore gets no love with the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and no love with the Blues Hall of Fame. They're kind of in that limbo. They're in that limbo place of the way John Mayall and the Blues Breakers were for so long.
I saw John Mayall at the Fillmore.
Oh yeah. I saw John Mayall even up to a year before he died. He was out and playing in his piece. So anyway, I came into the band with the intention of making a new record, and also getting these guys us, I'll say us, into the blues circuit, which didn't exist for a long time. So they were getting shoved into the oldies circuit.
Oh,
and Happy Together tours, and they're playing with the Monkees, and they're playing Canned Heat. You know, they were a dangerous biker band. You know,
hell yeah.
Along I think Canned Heat and Steppenwolf were two bands that get no respect, and that were so
Really.
Yeah. Where's Steppenwolf? Where are they?
I don't know.
I mean, like Beyonce's in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame before Steppenwolf. You know, something ain't right, kids. But they'll get there eventually. I think bands also. That's just my theory. One of my conspiracy theories. Bands that piss the wrong people off. Yeah. In the old days, the grudges went a long way. So, like Jan Wenner, rest his soul, he could hold a grudge worse than any Sicilian mafia guy. So he didn't like you, or he didn't like you. You weren't going anywhere as far as that award goes. But it's fitting that two rebel kind of bands like Steppenwolf and Canned Heat don't get in. They're still the best. Mm-hmm. But anyway, that's great. And while I was making that record, I had started making my own record, which I
see is coming out, and I put up a link so that people can pre-order it.
Yeah, it's called Gonna Be Two of Those Days, because we've all had one of those days. But when you got one on top of the other, you got the blues, So, but this is the first time that I've written all the songs. It didn't do covers. The other records were covers. They were more like bar band projects, stuff. Just gathering of the Black Italians had like 12 people, and Catherine Russell and me and Felix Cavaliere all singing, and it was in the spirit of Levon's Ramble. That band was made sort of the same time. It stemmed out of the Little Big Band, which turned into New York Nights with Donald Fagen, and so all of those things sort of culminated into that Black Italians band that was in-house. We were kind of. Every week we would play at Downtime, which was around.
I remember.
Yeah. So whoever was playing at the Garden would come in. So we'd be playing till 5 a.m. and misbehaving in the basement and coming back up and playing even longer. Misbehaving in the basement, coming back up, playing even longer. So it was. It made a lot of friends along the way, and finally I decided during COVID. Though the record's a little bit dark because of that.
Is it a blues record?
Well, I think it is. What is today? Look at what's being called blues, and I mean, even my buddy Slash is making a blues record. Yeah. It's like everybody and with all due respect, I've been have been a blues man with the job. I sat for 26 years, and we played so many blues and got so many blues people on, and we were like a jump blues band, Max Weinberg 7, when we started, and I remember bringing Jimmy Rogers on, James Cotton, Luther Allison, Kim Wilson, Joe Louis Walker, Johnny Johnson, Pinetop Perkins, the legendary band, Bob Margolin, all those guys. And we were the only show to have any blues on it. And I was a blues man with a job. So when I was done and the golden handcuffs were off, I said, well, now I'm going to go out and do this is my retirement, going out and playing blues. And meeting all the people that have been writing to me for so long, but hey, I watched you when I was growing up. And some of these fantastic guitar players I knew, Joe Bonamassa, when he was 13, and he's a good friend, kind of a godson for me. And so I work on his team on the Keeping the Blues Alive cruises. And during COVID, we did some work where we put together.
Well, Jimmy, before you get into what were you doing when the lights went out? What were you in the middle of when COVID struck and everyone had to stay home?
Let's see, what year was that?
It was 2020. It was
still working with Conan.
Oh. And
we were doing shows during COVID. Then we started doing live shows at the Largo. It was Conan at Home, it was called.
Right.
And it was like a podcast kind of.
Right.
It was the seed for his podcast. And by the way, his podcast, him and Mark Maron, their podcasts are so great because they don't have to stop every 5 minutes for a commercial. They don't have to have insipid guests that have nothing to say. They get to choose who they bring on, and they get to talk for an hour straight through or more. I don't know how long people talk anymore, but so it's even more. It's more gratifying to the host, you know, especially somebody with a brain that can sustain that kind of conversation with anybody. So yeah, that's what we were doing. And then it was just I would get up every morning and do a bathrobe blues in my bathrobe and put up a 60-second clip every morning during COVID. And at that time, then I just started writing. Some things were left over. A couple were left over, things that I had written before, but it just sort of started coming. And it's something I didn't concentrate on before. But I never, you know, I was always in this business to be a music director, to be an arranger, you know, to be an orchestrator, and to make the artist look their possible best. You know, from when I started with Darlene Love and Ronnie Spector, and then Phoebe Snow, Al Kooper, Laura Nyro, the greatest person I ever worked with.
We have to talk about all those women.
Laura was the only real artiste, I think, that I ever worked with, besides maybe Fagen, you know, who's on another level. And Levon meant so much to me, and Hubert Sumlin, Johnny Johnson, my blues mentors. So the blues always had a foothold. Always had a hold of me, rather, the blues, from when I was a kid. Al Kooper and Mike Bloomfield were my biggest heroes at first, and then my friend turned me on to Muddy Waters and Howlin' Wolf, and I kind of found out, you know, the journey backwards that Mike Bloomfield took, the same journey back further to see where it came from, where you know, what the root of it was. And I always say that, okay, the blues to me is a house that I'm allowed to rent a room in. I didn't build it. It's not my house. I'll never say it's my house. I'm allowed to rent a room as long as I don't rearrange the furniture and mess with the integrity of the structure, you know, too much. And I think that it's such a broad stroke as to what blues is anymore. But there's room for all of us. There's room for the acoustic blues. There's room for more women guitar players than I've ever seen in my life. It's almost like now they can say to me, "You play pretty good for a guy."
You know, it's so interesting, Jimmy, because I interview so many musicians, and almost all of them seem to be rooted in jazz, right? They start in jazz. And I remember you telling me that all music, even jazz, is really rooted in the blues.
Of course it is. The blues is the root to everything. And I had my jazz flirtation, you know, and I know just enough to get me in trouble. And Miles Davis said it one time when somebody came to sit in with Miles, and Miles said, "You know, what you want to play, man?" And he said, "Let's do something simple, man. Let's do a blues. Something simple." Miles said, "You better pick something else." Else, nothing was deeper if you're really feeling it. You know, and Hubert Sumlin, there was no head involved. It was heart to hand, you know, and that's the real blues. Sonny Boy Williamson, he made the songs up on the spot. They were never the same twice. The lyrics came to him. Lightning Hopkins, those are the guys that didn't run their show. They just played the way they felt that day, what they felt like playing. Even if they thought they were playing the same song, it didn't even have the same lyrics half the time.
Wow.
It was a real living experience. It wasn't a Broadway show, you know, which I have, believe me, I'm still working on Broadway. I'm working on a brand new Broadway show called Delta Blue, which I'm writing with Matt Williams and Massia Sari, who is a fantastic composer, and myself, and there's other people involved.
Is it like a jukebox musical?
Oh no, it's gospel and blues. It's the gospel connection to blues.
Wow.
We're working on it. No, we've been working on it. And that's another thing I worked on during COVID. We've been doing that, and finally this year is the first time we all met in a room and started working together, because it was all this kind of thing that we're doing now.
Right.
So yes, I still have a respect. I'm not putting Broadway down, but the show has to be the same every night. The blues shouldn't be that way outside of a scripted show, which is about the blues, but isn't like creating the blues on the spot. It's more of a informative as to the connection of gospel and blues and the struggle of being a preacher and a blues man. Something I learned something about from Roebuck Staples, from Pop Staples, how it was he couldn't play, it wasn't allowed to play the blues, or he had to hide playing the blues. Thomas Dorsey, who was one of the greatest gospel, traditional gospel writers in the 30s, 40s, was also Georgia Tom, who played blues with Scrapper Blackwell and Tampa Red. And he slummed in the blues in a way that he made a lot of money, but he had to hide his identity in the blues because the church is still kind of about the blues, but the fact is, good gospel is blues too. It really is. Anything that's about just full of emotion. And a lot of times I say it's either the blues is just a complaint with the music, really. It's just, that's why it's all, you listen to George Jones, it's blues, it's blues as much as Hound Dog Taylor is, because you believe this torturous story that this guy's going through. That's a bit more scripted blues,
So is your music that's coming out on this album, is it self-revelatory? Is it?
Yeah, it's reflective.
Mm-hmm.
When you're young, when you're young, your music is projective, and when you're old, your music is reflective.
Uh-huh.
I don't have any. I can't project solutions to anybody or anything, but I can just sing about what personal things. But a lot of times too, it's like any writer draws upon influences, and it's not so black and white that this happened to me. You do create characters in your head with your experience that live your experiences through a song. I mean, that's pretty common. Common stuff. We come from a generation that learned from the greatest songwriters, from Irving Berlin to John Lennon, and for me, it goes on from there. There's so many great songwriters even today. If you can get past the sound of a record and just get into the song, you'll find that, I kind of take that song. I just don't like the production maybe, but listen to what's being said. It's pretty cool, that anything that sells 1 million records has something to be desired. You need to listen to it and see, take a song outside of the record and just learn it on your guitar or piano or whatever you do and play it. And you'll find out, okay, yeah, I can connect with this. But maybe it's...
So we're talking Taylor Swift here or something like that?
But I haven't listened to her enough to even form an opinion.
Me either. I have no idea. I couldn't name a song.
I can't get past the vaudeville part of it, So, I can't get past the use of tracks. I can't get past 10, 12 dancers on stage. Yeah. I saw James Brown and worked with James Brown, and he was one dancer on stage and one singer. And with all due respect to everybody that followed him, they followed him, but they never got there. James Brown and Sly are more important, than, I hate to say it, to me, they're more important. They were my Prince, Bruno Mars, he's picked up that,
I've seen Bruno Mars live. I gotta say, he's something very special.
No, he's picked up the same way Prince did.
Yeah, he's very special.
They really picked up on James Brown, didn't
they? Yes, absolutely.
That I think, and Sly too. Sly Stone was right out of church.
Yep.
And and I think that had one of the first integrated bands besides the Chambers Brothers that I ever saw. With Sly and the Chambers Brothers and the Butterfield Band, you know, in Chicago. But yeah, there are, that's what, you know, and I think like of Prince and Bruno Mars as new acts. They've been around. Right. They've been around for a long time. Anderson .Paak, he's great. You know, him and Bruno together is great. Yep. And I don't know. I like to see somebody playing an instrument and singing, and
Bruno does. He comes out and he plays.
Yeah, sure. He's got his own Fender guitar. But no, I have big props and respect for anybody that's putting a band up there and not playing the tracks. You know?
Right.
And that, to me, that's not, you know, that's Hall of the Presidents, animatronics. You know, I mean, get up there.
Wait a minute. I just saw on your page that you're going to be playing with Bill Murray. What is that about?
I'll go back to the old days together. We go back to downtime and you know, and joints in Chicago, blues bars, and the whole family is family to me. Billy, Johnny, Andy, Joel, and you know, and they're all, and Brian Doyle Murray, of course, and I didn't know Ed. He's the only one I didn't know. But so you know, Mike Zito, who is a great guitar player and blues man, and a rock and roller too, Southern rock sort of cat. He runs his record label is Gulf Coast. We're putting my record out, so we work together quite a lot. And he knows. At one time, Albert Costello and him, who are the Blood Brothers, were on a gig that I was doing with Bill at his Caddyshack tournament, and we all played with Bill together. And then decided, hey, you know, we need to take this out. This is too much fun. You know, we need to do this. And you know, I've been playing music with Bill forever. And you know, besides the humorous aspect of it, he's got a lot of heart and really can deliver out there on stage. And so
we're going
to do a bunch of shows, you know, and they're aggressively booking it, and I'm doing like 90% of the shows. Because of my schedule, we're promoting my album starting in March. But yeah, that's happening. Let's see, Canned Heat is happening. My record's happening. The Broadway show is happening.
So is it great fun for you to play with Canned Heat? Is that like a childhood dream for you?
It's so great every time we play.
Wow.
And it's so, you know, it's a band that has a lot of freedom within the music. We really play. We really play. We really. I haven't had that much fun, and also writing for Canned Heat, and you know, and having a brand new album, Final Vinyl.
Wow.
Yeah, that's a really good album that's out right now. It's called Final Vinyl. We don't know though, but right now, that was. I didn't see doing it and just running the catalog, which is great. It can run itself a great show, but now the new songs are being really well accepted, and they fit right in the style of Canned Heat, because it's like with Levon, when you have the drummer Fido driving, you're going to get there. You know, you're going to get there. He knows the way, and the feel is so much. You know, that's why Zeppelin couldn't continue, really, without Bonham. I'm surprised the Stones continue without Charlie, but knowing Steve Jordan is so faithful to Charlie Watts.
Although I just saw them this last tour, and I had seen them, but I don't know. It wasn't the same for me. It wasn't the same for me.
We've all seen them like not hundreds, but at least 20 times.
It's not the same.
No, it's not the same, but neither was Sinatra later in life.
That's true. I saw him later in life, and he was not the same. That's true.
It didn't matter, though, you know.
Although I've seen The Who a bunch of times. My friend Lawrence, the keyboard player, and they're still the same. They're still The Who.
Two? The two? The TWHO? Well, they're the same. They got 10 people on stage.
They're still great. I mean, Roger and
Roger and Pete are like
Roger and Pete are still great.
You know, yeah. Roger is an anomaly.
He is. He's unbelievable.
Roger and Robin Zandar that blow my mind every time I see Robin or play with him or hear him or anything. Not only how great they both look, but they haven't changed any keys, you know. You know, yeah.
We went to see Sting a couple weeks ago at the Wiltern, where I saw you at the Fab Faux do the White Album about 6 years ago. And Sting did everything in this original key also.
But they did, you know, and they took their police license to do it the way they wanted some of it. You know, Sting, he's not gonna mimic the old record so much, you know. He's just a great musician.
Although this time he did it with a three-piece band. He played bass on everything, and he kind of
had someone else playing or some tracks or something.
But no, he did everything himself this time. I saw him a year ago at the Bowl, and he didn't. But this time he played everything.
It was the Police. Was that the Police? Was that the Police?
No, he played a lot of Police songs.
Because there was a Police show that I heard.
I didn't see the Police show.
Some liberties with the music.
Did they? This time he was pretty right on this time. It was shocking.
Well, you know, there's a voice that hasn't changed, and also what a writer, my God. It was him and Elvis, you know, Elvis Costello, never.
Oh my God.
And Tom Petty, there's not a bad song on any album, you know.
A bad song.
Petty was the last to me of the really superstars, you know. That Petty was amazing, and I don't know, I don't see anything like that out there anymore. Maybe there is. I don't know who's filling stadiums, versions of the Grateful Dead, and you know, selling out. You know,
the Stones are still filling stadiums.
But then there's people doing well that aren't mainstream, like Derek and Susan, who are dear friends of mine, and they can do 2 weeks at the Beacon sold out, playing their music and doing what they want, you know, and it's so niche now, isn't it? It's like we used to go and see 3 different bands at the Fillmore.
Oh my God! And they were all great, every one of them.
Nothing to do with each other either, by the way. Right. You know, occasionally they were on the same label, but you know, you would get a jazz act, and you would get a folk act, and then you would get a hard rock act or a blues act. Yeah. I remember seeing a young, you know, upstart band out of Boston, the Geils Band, open for Albert King, and then
I was there. I was at that show. We've talked about this.
The Allman Brothers. Come on.
Crazy.
The Albert in the middle. This was impossible to top for me. But the Allmans at that point were just getting. They hadn't even recorded the live album yet. So Idle Wild South was the tour. I still have one of those little Filmore things, you know, the program.
Oh God.
And it said somewhere in there, like, in 2 weeks, the Allmans will be returning to the Fillmore to record a live album. Oh and Idle Wild South was the current record they were touring on. And so, yeah, all those people that stepped out of my record collection and concert tickets into my life were amazing. You know,
and you got to play with so many of them on Conan. Like, we didn't touch on that last time. What was that like for you, being the MD on that show and playing with so many of your?
When we did get to play with them, or I did get to do arrangements, or did get to work personally with them, it was always great. And not only there were a lot of other situations where I would work with people that I just loved, grew up with, you know, and loved. And part of that was my working at the Bottom Line all the time and being like Alan's go-to guy to get a band. And at Chicago Blues downtown, go-to guy to get a band to back up Otis Rush or whoever you will. And, you know, I mean, there's moments that stick out playing with Al Green, sitting back in his dressing room, talking to him. And he was such like an innocent, almost, you know, just like a gentle spirit, incredible. Isaac Hayes, you know, James Brown,
We talked a lot about the James Brown Soul. What was it called?
That show is not, people don't even know about that show, but having Wilson Pickett there and Robert Palmer, who I worked with later I worked with Robert Palmer, again. But at that point, Robert Palmer was like, and Billy Vera, they were like, what are we doing here? Because there's Aretha, James Brown, Wilson Pickett, and Joe Cocker.
Oh my God. And it's called the Soul Sessions, I think.
Cinemax, a Soul Session with James Brown. It was on Cinemax when Cinemax and HBO were new entities, and Joel Gallen, who later sort of pioneered MTV Unplugged, was the producer, and I knew him because he was our road manager when I was with Felix Cavaliere. So,
God.
And then I said to him, if you recall, I said, hey man, I know you're going out to do some stuff in Hollywood. Give me a call. So he called me, and we did. That's where I met Sebastian. We did a thing called Deja Vu, where the backup band, and I came in as an MD for Ronnie Spector and Peter Noon and Darlene Love, and then NRBQ was there with Sebastian. So Felix Cavaliere was going to be backed up by them. And then they said to me, I knew NRBQ. And they said, well, why don't you come on and you can sing Eddie's parts and play conga, and we'll, and I met Felix then, and then we started working together after that. And Sebastian and I became like best friends, second to Al Kooper, my second best friend. It depends on who I call and what kind of mood Al is in that day as to who I call my best friend. But one or the other, two of my biggest heroes and two of the sweetest cats that are just so talented. Anyway, so then Joel Gallen was working on that show. And then he went on and calls me one day and says, hey, remember when you said to me?
Well, what I recall is you said to him, I'll do anything to work with James Brown. I'll carry guitar cases.
Yeah, so I will carry guitar cases in. And then he called me, oh, remember when you said, and he was holding me to it, and he wasn't going to pay me. He was
really?
He said, look, I really can't, someone else is acting MD and they're just not in it, they're too busy. I need you to ghost this thing for me. I said, I'll give you a credit. I'll get you a first class plane ticket to Detroit, because we have to do it in Detroit because Aretha won't go. She won't travel. She won't fly. We got to do it in her town. And I'll put you up in the best hotel, where everybody's going to be. And I said, I'll give you $500. I said, okay, I'm in. And, the first night I got there, I got a call from Pickett. And I don't know if I told you this. He says, hey, listen, man, I got to, you tell the producer, I got to record my bit at dress rehearsal. I can't be there for the show. I said, you can't. And I said, Wilson, you're leaving it up to me? Said, you're a music director, right? And I said, why not? He goes, well, the marshals are coming because I got paternity suits out all over Detroit.
Oh my God.
Went to the producers and I said, we got to shoot Wilson the day before. He's not going to be here. They're going to come looking for him. He's going to be gone already.
Oh my God.
God bless him. Because, man, and James Brown went along with it because he's the only one that had to do a number with Wilson. And they did Cold Sweat together. So when you see Wilson, we take the show both nights anyway. But we could only use Wilson's bit from the first night. We use other bits from the second night. But we had an invited audience both nights. Joe Cocker gets there, and Michael Lang was his manager, who was a friend of mine, and he says, Joe wants to meet you down in the bar. He wants to there's a piano down there. And I had one night to write the chart for the JBs. I had to, for Maceo and those guys, I had to write a horn chart and a rhythm chart for When a Man Loves a Woman. Joe wanted to sing that. So I went down to the bar with Joe and I started playing. I'm in like A flat, B flat, C, D. I'm finding the key. I said, Joe, how are we going to know what the right key is? He goes, well, when it hurts right here. I'm like, Then I'll know we're in the right key. And we proceeded to drink like a bottle of Remy XO together, and had a great time, and had to get up early the next day and work. And what a sweet guy, man. What a talent. Like, you can't even think of the sound that comes out of this guy. Michael McDonald's like that. When he starts singing and you're sitting right next to him, it's like sound that's coming out of this guy. It's like, there aren't that many Ray Charleses in the world, but the few that are, Stevie Wonders, Ray Charles, where are these guys today? Where
well, I know where Stevie is on Saturday night because I'm going to see him, and it's the first time since '71 I'm going to see him.
He's another one, same key.
Wow.
Do you know
Snuffy's on Songs in the Key of Life and All Day Sucker, and Stevie says, "Play it funky, Snuffy," at the beginning of the track.
So he got name checked. Oh man, I saw him in '71 before.
We were talking, but I think I saw him with the Stones when he was little Stevie Wonder. Did you see him before that or after that?
Well, if that would have been when he was little Stevie Wonder with the Stones, would have been in the '60s. That would have been like
no. Maybe it was 70. It might have been 70. Might have been 70.
When Talking Book came out, I think 71 maybe. When Talking Book came out,
that might have been 72. Anyway, yeah, right around the time.
That tour. Well, they did a Howlin' Wolf on it. All of a sudden, America got Stevie Wonder because of the Stones again. Because I went a year and a half before that to see the Butterfield Band and Stevie Wonder at the Capitol Theater in Passaic. There was maybe 300 people there.
Stop. Oh my God.
Two acts that nobody wanted to see at that time.
Wow. What kind of show did he put on there?
An incredible show.
Wow.
Got up, played the drums, played the harmonica. He already had clavinet and stuff, and a lot of the stuff was from Music of My Mind. Every day I want to fly my kite. I just love that around. He still did You Call My Name, ooh, so sweet. All that If You Really Love Me, Signed, Sealed, Delivered still. But a lot of new stuff, Keep on Running, Heaven Help Us All. A lot of stuff from the Signed, Sealed, Delivered period and the Where I'm Coming From. And then maybe Superstition and Sunshine, they were new songs. Here's a new song, and I was gassed because I love Stevie Wonder. I had collected every single record.
Oh yeah.
When he did the very first one where he's just singing standards, and he's like 11 or 10 or something, and right through right before Talking Book, when he broke, and between Talking Book and Intervisions, he became this incredible, not a bad album ever. Another guy. I even like, I like them all. I think he never ran out of gas. He's singing and playing as great as ever. Bless him for sure, man.
So, and this show that you worked on is on YouTube. I found it today. I'm going to go watch it tonight.
You can watch it.
Oh my God. And so what was it like working with Aretha? You worked with Aretha that day?
Yeah. She was just so great. She was we were there in Detroit because of her. And it didn't matter if you're Wilson Pickett or James Brown. The Queen was here. He was in charge. The greatest moment was we had this idea. Me and Joel Gowan got together and said, wouldn't it be great if James Brown, let's bring this to Aretha and James and Mr. Brown and Aretha, because she was fine with being Aretha. He was Mr. Brown. The idea was how about if Aretha sings, if James Brown starts, he's singing This Is a Man's World. And then towards the end of it, Aretha busts in and sings Do Right Woman at him.
Wow.
He stands there and she sings it at him. and they went for it big time because they're showbiz.
Right.
They know from showbiz.
Was it the first time they sang together?
I don't know. I think so. It was certainly the same time Pickett and James Brown sang together.
Was it magic? Were they magic?
It was magical. And, James Brown, though it was his show, and he was really, in a lot of ways, you had to acquiesce to all of what James Brown had to say because it was his band.
Right.
And there was nothing more exciting, as exciting as it was to work with James Brown on the Fringe, because his band, there was no working on James Brown's music. In fact, I was out there with Robert Palmer rehearsing Addicted to Love with the JBs, and I have both drummers going. I don't know if I told you this one, but it was a great moment for me.
It's a great story. Tell it again.
I had both drummers playing. They got this hellacious thing going on. That's a great groove. And the horns are going. We worked out all the parts. Maceo was gracious and, looked at my charts and penciled a few things and said, we would do this, and we did it their way, because the idea was to not sound like just any band, but to sound like what they would do.
Right.
And the bass player, I said, do your thing, man. I think it was maybe Fred Thomas on bass, and Charles Sherrill was playing clavinet, and it was just a great band. It was just and Jimmy Nolan was still there on guitar, and I was gassed because that was my favorite James Brown guitar player, and so I was working with him, and then Charles Sherrill, who's like the MD of the James Brown band, taps me on the shoulder. He says, "Hey man, you got it. You Mr. Brown wants to talk to you." And James Brown is standing down there, and he's got the scarf and wraparound shades, and his hair is like up. He's doing great, man. Mr. Brown wants to talk to you. So I go down there I'm not tall, but I had to lean down. I had to lean down into him. I said, "Talk to me." And he says, "Why you got two drummers playing?" I said, "Well, Mr. Brown, there's two drummers in the band." I thought, he goes, "Not when I play, not my music." He goes, "Well, if I may, sir, because you have to be very careful. You don't say I'm teaching. You don't." I said, "Well, I thought I would try the two drummers because it sounds." He says, "Yeah, it sounds good, but not with my music." I said, "Well, Mr. Brown, with all due respect, I have nothing to do with your music." He says, "That's right." And I said, "I'm just running through the song for Robert to get used to your band. And we thought that two drummers would sound good. Well, it's fine on this, but not when I play." I said, "Well, you do your thing, man." And he was okay with that. But he was watching. He was listening. He is one of the world's greatest natural arrangers.
Really?
He might not tell you what it is, but he'll tell you what it ain't, And he can't name it. But he
duetted with each of those performers on this show, right?
Yeah, I had to go through that with. He just caught me once. He just caught me once.
So if he's duetting with each one, is his MD doing those, or are you? It was his band. His band, and I had worked with the band as a music director for the show. Right.
His band had Charles Sherrill, and I worked closely with Charles and Maceo mostly, as far as the horns went, and Charles as far as the rhythm section went. People have designated duties in James Brown's band.
Right.
And it's a well-oiled machine. And they're quick, man. They don't, they're quick. They pick it up and they worked on stuff. They didn't come in cold. We had some communication about what it was going to be, what key it was going to be, all of that. And to me, being an arranger and music director, that was more thrilling than my interaction with the artists. Actually, was making sure that everything was okay for each band.
But so now, like when he sang with Robert Palmer, who ran? Did you do that, or did his MD do that?
No, the band was rehearsed already. I had put arrangements together, but worked with his band. So by the time they came to rehearsal and James Brown got up there with whoever, they knew what they were doing.
Right.
You know,
right.
So there was no foreign, and he had an occasional suggestion that was always good. You know, when I do this, you know, he still has to take the reins, no matter what. You don't just insert him in without him saying something. You know,
what did he sing with Joe Cocker? Do you remember?
I don't know if there was duets all the time. I don't think. No, Billy Vera had no duet. Joe Cocker had no duet. I don't think Robert Palmer had a duet. The other duets were with Aretha and Wilson Pickett.
What did he sing with Wilson Pickett?
Cold Sweat.
Cold Sweat.
The Soul Giants. You know.
Wow.
The Soul Giants. That the point was, you know, they had earned duets with James Brown.
Yeah.
The rest of us were tourists, including Cocker. And that's why, like, when Billy Vera said to me, "What am I doing here?" I said, "You have a really big record now." You know, what was that? What would you say? He had this great ballad, Billy Vera and the Billy and the Beaters. That was a soul song. It could have been a Wilson Pickett, or it could have been an Otis Redding song. It was that beautiful. And so, you know, it's always part of those shows to take the established artists along with some newer artists, you know, and Joe Cocker fell right in between, someone that had been around a long time and had a lot of respect from everybody there, you know.
Wow.
Yeah. And I mean, James Brown heard Joe Cocker sing, you know, I mean, there was no denying. And Robert Palmer's so cool. I'm really convinced that he was like a James Bond kind of a secret agent, and that singing was just his front. I mean, because I had many encounters with him and gigs I would do with him, and he always had a suit on, even at rehearsal, and he always had like a martini in his hand. And
fun!
You know, and he was, you know, like him and Brian Ferry were kind of like I think they were spies both. And then maybe David Byrne was the goofy American spy. You know, those two guys were the English agents, you know. Yeah.
So Jimmy, I know you come from a very musical family. Your brother, Uncle Floyd, played for me 40 years ago. And your other brother, Jerry, I know you credit with being the most talented of the lot. You've always said that. And your dad was a trumpet? Your dad was a trumpet player.
Yeah, he was great. He just couldn't. He wasn't allowed to. You know, a family that, you know, kids. Oh boy, here I go. I sound like just an alto cocker here. Kids today. No, but people in general today, don't understand that if your family was carpenters, you were a carpenter. My father was the first one to break that mold. You know, was
he American born, or was he born in Italy?
There, and he came over in 1932. He was 5 years old. They came steerage on the bottom of the boat. You know, they came over like in Titanic on the bottom of the boat. You know?
Where are your people from? I was just in Italy for a month.
From Calabria. My father's people are from Calabria, and my mother's are from Naples or Napolitan, and Napolitan, and the Calabrians. It turns out Floyd did like one of those 23andMe or whatever you call it.
Yeah.
He found out that all it's Sant'Andrea is the town in Catanzaro in the mountains of Calabria. And he found out that our people are actually Albanians. So I'm in blood. So I'm closer to the Belushis in blood than I am to the De Niros.
Wow.
Which is, it's funny because there was more resemblance, you know, that Greek, the Belushis look very Greek, you know, like Albanians, Greeks, very Mediterranean. There was a lot of conquering going on in those days. Inhabitants. So yeah, my father.
So your father was a carpenter, but a really talented musician, but not allowed to do it.
Yeah, the funny thing is, my Uncle Frank, my father's uncle, my great uncle Frank, who he ran the Plaza Ballroom. He was a bass. I don't know. He was a band leader. I think he might have played the upright bass. I'm not sure, but he had a big band in the 40s. in the Plaza Ballroom in Dance Hall in Paterson, New Jersey. And my father played in that band, and my father's brother played in the band. They were both carpenters. And his cousin, Frank Viv, and his uncle Frank played saxophone in the band. And my mother's family, the Bellows, my grandfather on her side had a theater in Paterson, New Jersey, an Italian, theater, where like that scene in The Godfather where they go, Abbondanza, the grocer takes De Niro to see this woman that he's in love with, and they have this Italian play, and it's in Napolitan, and the guy's so emotional. He's singing "Mamma, Mamma Mia," and he's ready to shoot himself in the head. And the play goes on, and that's the kind of theater that my grandfather had in Paterson. And that side of the family, my cousin John, the trumpet player, another trumpet player, he was lead trumpet for Judy Garland.
Wow.
Barbra Streisand. And
now, how come he was allowed to do it and your father wasn't?
Side, not the Vivino side.
Ah.
And it's funny too, because my grandmother on the Vivino side, her brother Uncle Nick Perosi, he ran a music school, but her people weren't carpenters; they were bakers, but mostly. He had the Paterson Academy of Music out of his house, and he taught mandolin and accordion there.
Wow!
How cliche can you get? Mandolin and accordion. But the carpenters came over and they started working, and you had like this they were building houses, and my father and his brothers and my grandfather and his three brothers, they were carpenters, so that was a construction dynasty kind of thing, and there was no saying I'm gonna go and I can't come to work. I got to go play a gig or whatever.
Yeah.
But then when he went in the Army, he started playing regularly in the Army big band. He was stationed in Virginia at Fort Belvoir, and he would go and see Basie and Ellington and all these great big bands that played, down in Virginia. So, he played great, and just was my first teacher. He wouldn't. Another thing where, people would call it passive aggressive today, and they'd probably take their parents to court, but he wouldn't take me to my lesson. He would kind of shame me he would make me play it before I went to my cousin John for the lesson. And he would say, well, you just didn't practice enough, and you're not ready to go, and I'm not wasting my money on you,
Wow.
I would feel really, really terrible. But what did it do? It instilled a work ethic in me. It didn't traumatize me. I knew the truth. The truth was I didn't work too damn hard that week. I made sure I worked hard, and that meant coming home from school, practicing before you go out to play ball with the rest of the kids. You just show up, put the time in, and there was a music room in the house with instruments, just laying all a piano.
Did you pick what you wanted to play, or was because you didn't start out on guitar?
Well, no, I played trumpet, and when I would go in Rochelle Park, New Jersey, my cousin John, who was the trumpet player for, all these great Judy Garland and everybody, and Streisand, he had a music store there, and I'd go there to take lessons from him when he was around, or this other guy, Winston Miller, who was there when John was out on the road. And I saw a K bass up on the wall, K, 4-string funky K bass. And every time I went in that store, I was just like enamored with it. I was like, so my uncle had left a Stella guitar down in the basement, and it had a couple strings on it. And I remember in 1967, I was 12, I guess, learning the bass line to A Day in the Life on that thing. The Beatle record, I was hooked on that record, and I wanted to play bass so bad, and I couldn't. And the bass was like $50 or $59. No way. My father was maybe making $60 a week in 1967, 67.
So you played trumpet because he played trumpet? Was that?
Well, of course I did. I wanted to. I loved my father's playing, and the music I heard around the house was Harry James and Louis Armstrong and Roy Eldridge, and and of course the obligatory Sinatra and Dean Martin records. But there was also some Dion records, another one that is still a great friend of mine, because my mother's kid sister moved in for a while and brought all her like Dion records over, and she also had Frankie Valli records, and she also had any Italian singer, Johnny Maestro and the Crests, all these records.
Meanwhile, your brothers played piano. Well, Floyd played piano.
Jerry played clarinet and saxophone and flute. And then I was playing trumpet, but then I also picked up piano and guitar a bit, by ear. And went all the way through. At some point, though, I think when I was probably 13, my father, he did a job for my Uncle Joe, who was an electrician, and he needed my father to do a job for him. And instead of my uncle paying him, he said, your kid bought that Farfisa organ and he quit playing it. It's just sitting there in the corner. Why don't you give it to me for the work I'm doing? I'll give it to my kid who wants an organ, So he did it. So we got it that way. He didn't have to. He felt like he could work it off, but he couldn't pay for it, And my uncle, bless his heart, was not going to give it to me. I just, I would have had to go and work in a construction job running BX cable and working electric. I would have to work for it.
Right.
So yeah, I got that. And I was then getting into Steve Winwood and Al Kooper and Ray Manzarek, those and Goldie McJohn, who played with Steppenwolf. So those were my guys, I had to learn.
And were you singing from the get-go?
Yeah, I was always singing. We were singing. My brothers and I had a dance team. We danced at the World
dance team
before. Yeah. Tap, modern jazz. Then they tried to make us do ballet, and then we quit.
I remember you danced at the World's Fair, right?
We danced at the World's Fair, and at the same time at the New Jersey Pavilion. And
I love this.
Al Kooper tells me him and Harvey Brooks were playing on top of the carousel at the Queen's Pavilion every day at noon. So we were gigging at the same time. I was 9 and Al was 19 at the time.
Wow.
So it was always that if you're gonna, we called it showbiz. If you're gonna be in showbiz, you got to dance, sing, play an instrument, and act. You have to do all those things, Did
you study all those things?
Not acting, because we acted up a lot just around the house.
But did you study singing?
No, we just sang. And my brother Floyd would. I remember when I was like 10, I got they got me a little reel-to-reel tape recorder, and I used to tape Marx Brothers movies from top to bottom. Pause it at the commercial. And then we would go and listen to him, and Floyd would say, okay, tonight we're going to learn this scene. We're going to meet. He lived in the attic. Floyd lived, we never saw him in the house. He was either in the attic or in the basement. In the basement, he had 3078s and a bunch of machines that he picked up out of the trash, wind up Victrolas. And in the attic, he had more machines and records and things. So he would say, we're learning this scene from Coconuts, the auction. I remember, yeah, I gotta, and Chico just kept saying, and it's not Chico, by the way, it's Chico, Mark.
That's right.
All right, and Groucho was like, how much for this? $2, $4. He kept raising the money, and I got lots of numbers, So we had to learn these scenes. We would learn these scenes, and that was part of our just play. That was part of.
Well, Floyd was a celebrity. Floyd had his own show. He was a deal in the 80s in New York.
He's an anomaly, He's out of the. He was a vaudevillian, He when we were going to Filmore, he was going to burlesque shows. And he was meeting Ann Corio, who was this fabulous burlesque queen. And
that's hysterical.
He met comedians like Pat Kooper and Joey Fay and Mickey Deems and all of these, all these Corbett Monica, all these he met all these
Corbett Monica. Oh my God.
So he met all the Italian comedians, and he was out to hang out with Jerry Vale when I was looking to hang out, with Jimi Hendrix. So we had totally different, but he would bring home the greatest soul records and records like On the Road Again by Can. He loved that record. He recognized the blues. Blues. He'd bring home.
Did you ever play with? I know you played with Jerry. Did you ever play with Floyd?
Well, we did. Like we would. The three of us would do stuff. Floyd played in banjo parlors. He played in places with banjo players, and and just like it's not even Dixieland. It's old time. It's ragtime stuff.
Right. He played ragtime when he came to my club.
Yeah.
And he was dressed the part too.
More like Jimmy Durante than anything I think of. That was his absolute hero.
Wow.
That Jimmy Durante was everything, that he wanted to be in showbiz. And then he got to, the point where he was great friends with Soupy Sales, who we grew up watching, and he was a big influence, him and Chuck McCann.
Wow, let's have fun.
And Sandy Becker, they were huge influences on my brother. That's why the puppets. That's why it's a weird. That's his. Me chasing the blues is him chasing these kiddie show guys, man.
Wow.
We're steeped in vaudeville and humor and doing impressions and dressing up, with puppets and with just like it was an odd thing, and we put on shows in the basement. We really typically put on a thing where you put a sheet up as a curtain. And then we make everybody come down on Sunday and sit there in the basement on folding chairs, and then we do a show. Whether it was, we sang along naturally. We sang along with every Broadway album we had. So I knew all of Trouble by Robert Preston. And Jerry used to sing Maria by, Maria from West Side Story. And we'd sing along with the record. He would sing out loud along. It wasn't really lip syncing. It was actually along with the record. It was for our ear training and music training. It was a great thing. I remember singing along with South Pacific, The King and I. I remember me and my brothers singing Happy Talk from it was
South Pacific. Did your parents love all of this?
What?
Did your parents appreciate all of this?
Oh, they loved it. They took us to Broadway shows, My father took us to see the big bands when nobody was going. We were kids going to see Count Basie and Duke Ellington, and they had a great, let's see, Stan Kenton, Lionel Hampton at the Henri de Noyer Auditorium in Hackensack, New Jersey. They had like a weekly series of bringing in big bands. So being a trumpet player and arranger, I was already in 8th grade. I was writing for big band already. So. They take me.
And how did that start for you, Jimmy? How did you
because I had the rock bands that I had. I was a trumpet player, but I played some organ too, and I wouldn't do anything without Jerry. So we always had horns. So all the songs we were learning when I was 12, we were learning songs from the Electric Flag, from Blood, Sweat, and Tears. Songs from the first Chicago record, songs from.
I was going to say Chicago, right?
Sly and the Family Stone, any band with horns,
right?
And I was transcribing the horn parts. I would, and I didn't do it at the piano even. I would listen to the record and pick out the parts, starting with the high part, middle part. I pick out the parts, and
How did you learn to do? Did you go to school for that? How did you learn to do that?
To write music, I knew I learned how to read and I knew how to write. And I had teachers that gave me books. One teacher gave me a book called Scoring for the Band, which had all the practical ranges of all the instruments. And there was a Walter Pistone book on scoring for the orchestra that I had. That I read those books top to bottom, like they were like Bibles. So by the time I got to college, I quit after the first semester. They were giving me those books. I said, but this book, I had this book since I was like, I was 12. Here I am, 6 years later, and you're trying to get me into reading this book. So I just started going out to work. I put a band together and got out of college. I said, I can't do this again. I already did this. I already wrote. I'm already writing. I'm already working as an arranger, doing things for bands. People will come to me in their band, say, we need 3 horns. I need 2 horns, and making money doing that. So I learned to do it first like that, and then I learned to do it at the piano, and then I could see the whole thing,
So Jimmy, what do you do when you get a musician who doesn't read? Can you work with a musician who doesn't read?
They're probably more brilliant than I am, or anyone I know, because they learn shit like that. They usually have a better ear than people that read.
Snuffy doesn't read.
Yeah, but you see what I mean is that they can commit something to memory a lot quicker. Mm-hmm. There's nothing in the way. There's no rules.
But can you, as an arranger and as an MD, work with a musician who doesn't read?
Yeah, sure. Mm-hmm. I have. And you know what? Snuffy can probably read a chart. He can read a chord. That's all that's necessary for anybody that's thinking, you have guitar players especially just have to learn to read a chart, a chord chart, and really that's just counting time and changing chords when the chord changes, and occasionally there's a figure in there, but you pick it up, and another good thing is if you become the arranger, you don't have to read so much. You just depend on.
He's a composer and he doesn't read.
Yeah, but that doesn't matter if he sits down at the piano and composes. A lot of people don't read. I would say 99.9% of my favorite musicians don't read a note. The blues, in the blues.
Right.
The blues. There's some that did, but I would say most of them don't read a note. And a lot of jazz musicians didn't read notes for years. But it's funny because rock and roll has brought around has kind of like taken away the necessity to read, because it's created in a different kind of way. It's created in a more organic way, and reading's kind of they're not necessary for rock and roll. It is for prog rock, maybe. Rick Wakeman, some amazing stuff that happened in prog rock. I would venture to say that Steve Howe could read, and that all those guys can read, but it doesn't make you a better musician. No. In fact, in a lot of ways, it can hang you up, because if you know the rules, that's you're going to get hung up because you'll be thinking, and that's the thing, to get rid of that. And a lot of people, they just run their scales and you see them on YouTube and you see them on Instagram, and they're just blazing, But I had a moment with Branford Marsalis where we talked about some of these geniuses, and he told me a great story. I'll paraphrase it though, that when he goes around sometimes and does a clinic, and somebody will come out, he'll say, okay, play it half as fast for me. And they can't, because they learn it at breakneck speed, or they learn it as that one thing. Or he'll say, take it from the middle. I don't know where the middle is. Frank Zappa would do that to people all the time. Hey, just take it from this bar. And he would point, and he would catch people that couldn't read, But Frank could write like Stravinsky, but wasn't a great reader himself. But he knew when somebody was not reading or somebody was reading, and I was like, Frank Zappa was a big hero of mine in that he was a guitar player that played all this great stuff, and everybody else around him had to read this impossible shit, and then he would just blow over it. I said, that's the guy, I need to be that guy. So the band, he becomes, the band plays him, everything he hears.
Right.
And he would hire people based on their technique to do a certain thing. And he would know a guy like Ian Underwood, who played sax and keyboards, he wasn't going to do what somebody else was, what Don Preston was going to do in the band, or like Mark Volman and Howard Kaylan were going to sing, though they don't know what notes they're singing. They're just hearing the harmony naturally, and he'd leave it to them. And that I would think that a guy like Jim Pons from the Turtles, who played bass with him, or Ainsley Dunbar, didn't really read either. So it was always, you had both things in Frank's world. And I always appreciated that he knew there was an organic rock and roll thing required to make his music rock. And there was also this classical and jazz entity that had to be brought in. And that was always what I thought was the brilliance of Steely Dan, how they would lay all this shit down and then let the guitars just go, and that's what made it pop music. Otherwise it just would have been jazz, Steely Dan without all of that rock guitar playing. There was a record called A Decade of Steely Dan that came out that I think I cut some of my running around when I started playing guitar when I was 23, which would have been in 78 or so. That record was out, and I got that record, and I sat down with that record, and I started writing out solos and transcribing, and then finally somebody would come along that never read a note and play that shit way better than I could, because they weren't restricted to where I thought it was played or what. That's when I started to realize that no, that's not the way to play. Is to read solos. So yeah, at first you do that. I mean, there's nothing wrong with it or being able to do it, but you're not really playing, are you? It's funny. It's a fine line, as you say, between reading and not reading. If I don't read much anymore. I'll write a chart out just for reference. If I'm doing something where, God, we got to do 20 songs, I can't commit them to memory that easily. But there's always somebody in the damn band that walks in with no charts and just smokes it. I respect that person at a high level.
So how did you go from playing in the basement with your brothers to playing with all your heroes and then becoming the musical director of the Tonight Show? How was it a natural progression? Was it luck? Was it knowing people?
We're going to pause for 1 second, okay? Because I gotta plug in. All right, can we go pause for a minute?
We go pause. Go. You pause. I'll. So I see all your questions, everybody, and I see Ricky. I'm going to tell Jimmy that you're on, Ricky, and that you're going to go see him in Florida. And Lynn, I'm going to tell him that that you're sending love. And Tony, I don't know if I'm going to ask your question because I don't know what the answer is going to be. So I'm going to let that one slide right now because I don't want to go to a darkness. But you just read enough not to hurt your playing. Yeah, well,
what question?
Jimmy, while you're plugging in, so Ricky Bird's on. And
hey, Bird!
Ricky's coming to see you in Florida in that little club in Delray.
We just communicated today about our Epiphone guitar, our Epiphone cornets. Yeah,
he's going to come see you in Delray on the 28th. He said.
I don't think he can read English, though, can
he? He doesn't have to. He can play the guitar.
Oh, sure can play, man.
He sure can play. And Lynn Orman from Chicago is saying that Chicago Blues loves you, and she's giving you a hug.
Oh, yeah, we love Chicago, man, even in the winter.
Ooh. So I forgot. Oh, so I was asking you, how did these transitions happen for you? Was it the people you knew? Did you work hard were you ambitious?
Well, when I was, when I first came into town, Paul Shaffer kind of, I worked with Alan Pepper I had worked at the Bottom Line with Phoebe Snow, with Al Kooper, with my brother Floyd, with Laura Nyro. I had done a series with Bruce Morrow, and like,
oh God,
and people would come in like Mark Lindsay or Chubby Checker or even Rick Derringer or even Benny King, all the people that I worked with. And so Alan asked me to come in and work on this show. He said, I think you'd be great to work on this show we're going to have Darlene Love. And, you know, I asked Shaffer, but he's too busy. I'm going to be upfront with you. You have to go meet with him. You know, he's got to meet you before he approves you as music director. I knew who he was. I loved his work, you know, with Dave. The show was like 2 years old only, 2 or, you know, whatever. And so I went up to the Gramercy Park Hotel where Paul lived. And I said to myself, Shaffer lives in a hotel. This was like Duke Ellington. Like Duke Ellington always lived in a hotel, lived in Carlton, wherever he was living. And I said, this guy lives in a hotel. How cool is that? So I go upstairs and I've talked to Paul about this before. And the door opens in a haze of pot smoke. And him and Harry Shearer are sitting on a couch, which faces the open door when I walk in. And Harry's there with him. And then Harry's on Saturday Night Live at the time. I know him. You know, I said, that guy. He wasn't really famous yet or anything. And so I had my charts and I took them out. And here's the string charts and here's the horn charts. Here's the rhythm charts. And Paul is kind of like, he takes them. He says, throwing them around. Yeah, they're fine. I'm sure they're fine. These look good. Okay, you're in. I left. Alan said, yeah, he said you were fine. He looked at him. He said, well, he said, I did that. I'm purely to appease Alan. He said, when I saw that what you had written, I knew right away it was going to be fine. And we worked together on that show. And it's funny because through all that time we're working together, we got to be really close. And they were going through that thing where Hiram was quitting and he was looking for a guitar player. And I was like, oh, wow, maybe I'll get the job. And he never gave me the job, never even on nothing. And
did you audition for it? Did you?
Never, not even a consideration. But jumping forward, many years later, he calls me when I got the Conan gig. And I said, hey, Paul. He said, yeah, I want to congratulate you. He goes, I always knew you would end up doing what I do. So I never hired you to do anything other than what I do.
Ah.
I said, and you want to hear something funny, Paul? I'm in the very office I used to visit you in at Letterman. I'm in the same office, and that piano we used to play is in the corner. And I moved the piano, we had to move it out, and there was roaches. And I don't mean the kind of bug roach. I'm talking about there was probably an ounce of pot in roaches under that piano.
Hysterical.
And but anyway, so we got to be really, really tight, and we would do things, so we were going down to do a big show in Asbury Park. Little Steven was putting on a show with La Bamba, La Bamba's big band. And I didn't know La Bamba. I didn't know Steven. But I had Darlene Love. I was with Darlene Love, and me and Paul and Steve Jordan went down to play with Darlene. So there were 2 drum kits. So Steve and Max were going to play. I met Max down there. That was the first time. And we put this powerful band together. And I got tight with Steven right away because we were like the same guy. He had done everything I had done, 5-6 years before me. Worked with all the same people, music director for everybody, and all that. So I got in with the Jersey Mafia. I got in. Me and Max became really good friends. When the Tunnel of Love thing exploded and the band got canned, Max called me. He said, I'm working on this project with Joe D'Elia called Killer Joe. It's kind of a jump blues band. It was kind of the same time Joe was doing Buster with Buster Poindexter with Johansson. Mm-hmm. I knew Johansson. So Max and I worked together with that, and we made a record with that, and blah, blah, blah. Nothing happened with that. So jump a couple of years forward, and having met Clarence and worked with him on a couple of TV shows through Shaffer, through Letterman first, and then through, again, Cinemax and HBO. Clarence was on a couple of shows with me. We got to be close. So I joined his band. I moved to Sausalito. So I'm living in the San Francisco Bay Area at Clarence's nice, beautiful house in Sausalito when Max calls me and says, look, I got an audition I told him we had a band. Now we got to put the band together.
Wow.
Don't tell Clarence. If you tell Clarence, he'll make one phone call and he'll get the gig without an audition because he's Clarence.
Wow.
His presence on camera was so great and so huge. And if you see him,
hell yeah,
Excellent Adventure, and you're like, there's the charisma this guy had. Didn't matter what he played, or if he didn't play at all, he was going to be a band leader on TV if anybody was. Plus we know. So I said, I won't tell Clarence. I'll just come home. You'll take my band. The Vivino brothers had put out their first record. So I had me and our second, we were doing some stuff. And me and Scott Healy, my brother Jerry, and Mike Merritt, James Wormworth, we had to not have, because Max was going to drum.
Right.
And I said, okay. And I'll get Pender and La Bamba from the Jukes. They'll do it. So we put the band together. We rehearsed like crazy. Max, to his credit, said we got to do more than just play music. We got to have a show. We got to have lights. We got to have a presentation. It's got to be fun. It's not, So, and on the other side of the coin,
how much time did you have to do this, Jimmy?
Oh, we had like one rehearsal to do it, right?
You had one rehearsal.
We had Max and I had headbanged about a bunch of jump blues stuff we were going to put together. We had to put like a 4 or 5 song audition together. And so we did. We got one rehearsal. The next day we went in for the audition. And we were up against like John Lurie and the Lounge Lizards. And they were like too hip for the room downtown.
Right.
But Howard Shore, he loved them. And he was Lorne Michaels' ear.
Right.
Our ear was Jeff Ross, who was the producer of the Conan show, Conan, and a guy named Robert Smigel, who was also a producer of the show.
Robert Smigel was from Saturday Night, yeah.
Jim Pitt, who was brilliant. Those 4 came to see us. Now, we put on our show, and Conan.
Where'd you do it?
Oh, we did it at SIR.
We
had set up lights and sound and everything, and we brought them in. And we did our 15-minute or 10 minutes.
Did you have banter?
No. No
banter.
10 minutes of stuff, And then Pender and La Bamba go over to Jeff Ross, the producer, and they're hugging and shit. I'm like, what's going on here? This is a good sign. And then Jeff Ross comes over and says, these 2 guys, I was Diana Ross's, no relation. I was her road manager. And these 2 guys were in the band. Pender and La Bamba. He loved them. I said, we're in, man. And Conan loved it because it was a lot of fun. It was like a jump blues bar band. We were having a ball. And the thing he wanted more than anything over hipness was energy. Right. And then when we got the gig, every publication was trashing us. These are not world-class musicians, because they were thinking, like Branford Marsalis, and like, and Kevin Eubanks, and this and that, and these are not world class, but Shearer, and his guys, and and we were like a bunch of bar band guys from Springsteen's band, and Johnny and the Jukes, Southside Johnny's band. These were just glorified Jersey bar musicians. Yes, that's what we were. And Conan loved that about us, that we were like cats, and he saw that, and we just had a good time for all that time because of that. We never didn't have a great time on that show, and nobody ever told us what to do, what music to play or anything. So
wow,
that was
Conan's.
That all kind of came just all like, and at the same time, before I get the Conan gig, in the same month, Laura Nyro had called me back because she wanted to put our band back together and go out again. And at the same time, Fagen wanted to go out with Steely Dan, and I couldn't do either of those things. But neither seemed as enticing to me, once again, as working as a music director on a TV show in a building, in Rockefeller Center, in a studio, in the same studio Letterman taped in and that Carson taped in. And I always knew. Paul used to just have me up in the old days before 9/11. I could just go down to the desk downstairs at NBC and call up to Paul's office, and he'd get on the phone and say, "Yeah, send him up." You know, you have to see my ID or nothing. You know, so I would go up and just haunt and stand around and watch, and just watch how it happens, how it works. You know, and Paul, to his, God bless him, man, he knew he was kind of grooming me for, you know, for a gig that he knew that I should be doing too. You know, and then when they moved, that's just kismet. You know, you can't wait. It wasn't going to wait for Letterman to end. They just moved, you know, and at the same time, that's how the door opened for the Roots. The same way with us, you know, moving, and Fallon,
right?
You know, and you know, the only snag in the whole thing was Jay Leno and his weirdness for what he did to us. But in the long run, look where Conan is. You know, he's got one of the biggest podcasts and doing so well that they're doing way better than they were running a TV show. And now he's hosting the Academy Awards this year.
Yes, I just read that.
So you know, that's why it was time for me to do my record and for me to do something in the twilight. You know, I think it's fair to say that after all these years, all of this comes into these records and playing.
Do you miss that, or are you happy to be doing something else, your own thing?
I don't miss it at all, because in a way it was golden handcuffs, as we say. Mm-hmm. You're in every day. I used to stress out because it'd be like in Chicago on Sunday playing, and I got to be in Monday morning and it's starting to snow, you know, and I got to be in the office. You know, I'm pushing the envelope by staying out over weekends and traveling, and I can't ever get anything happening as far as playing live in front of people, which I love more than anything. And now,
how much were you doing that while you? I mean, I saw you a bunch of times while you were doing Conan. Yeah, how much were you out on the road while you were doing Conan?
I was doing it a pretty fair amount of time, because Fab Four was happening.
Okay, now I wanted to talk about that before we go.
As much as I love Fab Four, and I don't ever talk, you know, down on anything. I think everything I do has a lot of merit. That has a lot of merit. But as far as that scaling down, because Will moved to France, and actually stuff like that, it runs its course. You know, the novelty wears off. We did. You
guys have been doing that a long time.
The highest level of thing we ever did was for Howard up at Sirius, and you can see those Sirius shows that we went and recorded live, the whole side of Abbey Road and a whole bunch of other, you know, things, While My Guitar and Here Comes the Sun. I don't know, a whole bunch of stuff, Walrus. You know, they're all on YouTube from Sirius. That was the highest point of that, and selling out Radio City and all that. But so now that it's scaled down, it's more fun. But for a while, it was like, you know, we were working a lot, you know, and Will and I were both trying to get back to our shows, you know. So it was always.
How did you guys start the Fab Four? I know the answer to this question, but
Will and I knew each other on the music scene in New York from, you know, working jingles together, working dates together, you know, working club gigs together, backing people up together. He was just the best bass player in the world, and still is. You know, for play anything, read anything, play anything, groove, and just have a great time, and just kick the band in the ass, whatever band it was. And so we lived in the same. He had moved into the same building I lived in on Mercer Street, and we'd arrive home from our TV shows just about the same time every night. Meet in the elevator. Elevator would be going up. I don't know what I was on. I was on 20 and he was on 27, something like that. And right as we get to my floor where I was about to get out, he would say, "So when are we going to start that Beatle band?" And the doors would be closing. Get out. Would you stop? No way. And I would say, "Why?" And then finally he calls me one night. He knows I'm home because we had just seen each other in the elevator. He says, "Come up to my place." I go, "All right, I'm coming up. Bring an acoustic guitar." So, okay. I thought maybe he's writing something I'm going to do something with him. And he had a little studio up there. And those guys were all there. It was like an intervention. So
a Beatles intervention.
Yeah, it is. And Frank Agnello, who
I love Frank.
Rich Pagano and Jack Petrozelli and Will. So Will and 3 other Italians and me. We're starting a Beatle band. I said, "Oh, you did it? Are you doing? Are we doing this, Will?" And then in my mind, I said, "This is Will Lee. This is the chance to do something with Will. That could be really interesting. If he wants to do it, it ain't going to be corny." And there were rules were set out right away. It's not a wigs and suits and noses band. We don't do accents. Nobody is one guy and the other guy, that guy. Anybody, whatever song, and we just started throwing songs out, that we all wanted to do. And whatever song somebody wanted to do, that would be their song. Whether John sang it or Paul or George or Ringo, it didn't matter. And then Will says, "Well, look, before we really do this, we should sing together and see if it's going to work." So he hands me that big Beatles, scores. It's called Beatles Scores book. And he opens up to Because from, Because the World. And he says, you play some keyboards, right? I said, "Yeah." He says, "Here." He throws that in front of me. And then Frank Agnello had already, he charted it out with all numbers, like the 4 parts. He had heard all 4 parts. He was brilliant. He's like a Brian Wilson guy, right? And he had heard all 4 parts and charted them out. And so we started dishing out the parts, and I'm playing the little harpsichord thing, and maybe not perfect, but I'm getting through. And I think we worked like 2 or 3 hours straight on it. And when we had it, or close to it, then Will said, "Okay, we can do this. If we can do that, we can do anything." That was the criteria for having a Fab Four. Will's name, of course, greatest name. People keep confusing it with other bands, Fab Four, but Foe, if you know what Foe means.
Yes.
So anyway, and we started the China Club. Our first gig was at the China Club, and I remember that. And I remember like Hiram was there that night, sat in, and some other Mitch, who used to be
Mitch Weissman, the real fake Paul.
One of the original Pauls.
Beatlemania, yeah.
Yeah, Mitch was there, and and just all those great China Club characters were there. And this was I believe the second China Club. I think it's the one on.
Oh, it wasn't the one up on 73rd Street, 74th Street.
No, it was the second one.
I never even went to that one.
Yeah. It was by then by the 90s,
I was out already.
Yeah, it was gone already. The other one, I had left too much of a slime trail into everyone, along with everybody else who went into that office of Dave's, so yeah, we started just doing little gigs around, like that, and then it got kind of exploded, and we did well. And we would go out on the road, and always lose money whenever we went to Florida or to Boston or Chicago or wherever we went. We couldn't sustain it because when you go on the road, you got to string a lot of dates together. It's a volume.
Right.
You can't fly, 7 people up for a one-nighter and your gear,
Right.
And hotels and for 2 days or 3 days and fly back. You can't make any money, but it was fun because it was fresh, and the intent was bringing the records to the stage. Not the stage to the records, which is what most of those bands were doing. They're blinding you with suits and wigs and noses, and you're not hearing much at all. It's the animatronics, like Hall of Presidents at Disney, so which is just one of the most bizarre things to me. So yeah, and you know what? And I don't put that down because that takes a bit of a talent too. There's something to it. I mean, it's like good good impressionist. I appreciate a good impression, but after a while, I really understand that it's not that person. So And we also, it was the intent of also making it a little more muscular, live, imagining what would it be like live at this point, taking all the elements of the record, long tails where I could play guitar solos, because I'm not doing it if I can't play.
Right.
And I just have to do an 8-bar solo and copy the solo, and then I'm back on Broadway, which was fun, and again, it's now less serious and more fun. The original intent was boys' night out bowling, and I separate it from the more creative projects that I work on, because it is a recreative project, no matter what you do.
Right.
You have the best writers, but they're not you. None of them are you.
Okay, so speaking of which, Jimmy, before we go, I asked you to grab a guitar before we sat down. Can you play us something off your new album? Something of yours?
Oh, let's see. Let me see. Can you hear it?
I can.
Used to live a good life, family and a home, respectable position, just like Mr. Jones. Sadly was a black sheep, just kicking to leave the fold. I was truly blinded by that fool's gold. Sometimes a man gets so tired of that same old. So I stared at my reflection. This must be some other man's fate. The grass is sure look greener. You're standing on the other side of the gate. So I packed up and hit the highway. I was out to beat the world. I was so mistaken by that fool's gold. Sometimes a man gets so tired of that same old. Sometimes I get the yearn about the way things used to be, but I can't stay with nobody can't stay with nobody needs to stay with me. When it's too hot in the kitchen, I run out into the cold. I was so mistaken by fool's gold. Sometimes a man gets so tired of that same old. The whole love in your head, oh, it's just fool's gold. And you dream about a romance, can be bought and sold. Nothing lasts forever, nothing you can hold. mistaken by that fool. There it is.
Gonna be 2 of those days.
It's gonna be 2 of those days. Coming out February 14th. You can go to jimmyvmusic.com and pre-order an autographed copy. We're starting with CDs, and then we're going to go to vinyl if we see how it does. Because we've already mixed it for both. You know, you got the vinyl's like
vinyl's happening.
Well, it always was for us. I tell you, you get that. You know, it's gatefold, so it opens up, and you can read everything. We included the lyrics and everything. To me, it's important to include lyrics in both formats, because really that's what it's about, you know. And I'm excited to see. I'm very hopeful that people will dig it, you know. And it's got 11 songs on it, except the record had the LP has 9, because remember, this used to happen, like the LP, it's only like 22 minutes a side, and CDs can be up to 50, 60 minutes, you know. But,
wow.
Hey, you know, though, the thing I love about a record is flipping it over and hearing side 2. Well, I appreciate your having me,
Jimmy. Thank you so much. And I'm going to put the link to your website in the liner notes, so people will be able to click and pre-order an autograph copy, even better. And thanks so much for doing this. It was wonderful to catch up with you.
And I'll have somebody send you a copy. All right. So
I would love that. And we're going to do Brent's. We're going to have to do lunch with Snuffy.
Yeah, we got to go to Brent's with Snuffy. That's all.
We got to do it.
I always go with Elliot Easton and Jeff Garland. That's
Jeff Garland did my thing. And also, wait, are the Bill Murray thing, is that coming to LA?
I ultimately, I suppose.
I hope so. We got to come see you do that.
Bill ever wants to go back to LA. Yeah. I know we're going. I know we're going to Chicago. I know we're going to New York. I know we're going to a bunch of other places on the East Coast and Midwest. So we're working our way there. I'm sure they're going to be in San Francisco without me. I'm doing my own, or I'm on Joe's boat. I'm on the Keeping the Blues Alive cruise.
Nice.
And you know, it's looking.
Are you going to do some dates in LA with your thing?
I have to see about. First of all, there's nowhere to play.
Ugh.
Now even the write-off room is closing.
I heard that.
Yeah. For me, you know, if not, the only place I know to play is that great little place called the Maui Sugar Mill in Tarzana, and that's just a little blues bar.
What about the Baked Potato?
I could play the Potato too. It's the same thing, you know. I can play there. Justin and I are good. I play there with my brother Jerry, and you know, I have some other things coming up there. Yeah, the Potato's cool. You know, I mean, I think I would probably get my LA. You know, I've got to have the one thing I learned from Hubert Sumlin and all these other guys was to have a different band, you know, in different towns. You know, is to have players available everywhere. And I've made a lot of friends that play all over the place. So, you know, that's also fun for me too. Of nothing I like better than playing with people I never played with before.
Ooh, how fun.
Yeah.
Well, I hope we get to see you and in a deli and on the stage. And
okay.
Thank you so much.